This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 267, Nubay. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today we talk with the founder of Nubay, a nonprofit that is empowering other nonprofits with Drupal. There is a narrative that Drupal 8 is for enterprise customers, and Nubay is an example of how enterprise functionality benefits websites of all sizes. Welcome, David Tarrant.
Thanks, guys.
Joining us today is Dave, the executive director and founder of Nubay. Prior to founding Nubay, Dave started and managed a number of early-stage software companies, and he started with the dawn of the microcomputer era, which has been renamed the PC and a couple of other times, starting sometime around 1980. I took a class. Quick aside here, our first rabbit hole of the show, I guess. I took a class in college, and I remember one of the only things I learned in that class was that there's microcomputers, mini computers, supercomputers, and a fourth one that I don't remember. But I remember being very confused by the
personal computers.
No, that's a microcomputer.
Okay, all right.
And I was so confused why they called these computers micro when, at the time there were CRTs and they were enormous. I have since learned about supercomputers and mainframes. So welcome to the show. Joining us as usual is Stephen Cross with Parallax Info Technology. What's new with you this week?
Hey guys, glad to be back with you again this week. In the current world we're in, there's another potential nominee for the Supreme Court, and it always makes me ponder on just the country we live in and the process we go through and how much I love C-SPAN. I don't know if you guys watch C-SPAN or listen to it, but it's such a great resource out there to get in, hear government happening real time and without the filter of the CNNs and MSNBCs and Fox News, you can kind of hear everything for yourself. So I've been enjoying the last 3 days of listening to the hearings.
It's like the raw feed for government.
It's kind of like the raw feed, right? You don't have the interpretations of it. You hear what it is yourself. And I listen to C-SPAN all year long, but it's these points in time when these big events that are happening that it's really just a great way to get involved in government or learn more about it. So C-SPAN is free. You can watch the live feed online every day. There's 4 channels. There's also a C-SPAN app you can install on your phone and listen to it, the audio version of it. So it's a great way to just civically hear and stay in tune. So I don't know if anyone listens to C-SPAN, but I love it.
Steven, see that monitor in the background I just swung over to kind of put on the screen?
Yeah.
I just turned C-SPAN off as we started this up. So it's been on all day.
Yeah, it's just, I have it on all day. I usually have it on a good portion of the day. In the last 3 days, it's just all day long. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's just in the background. Good stuff.
Yeah. Funny. Yeah. Usually I have Star Trek on BBC on all day. So maybe that's an indicator.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a boring thing, but I think once you tune into it and listen to what's going on, it's really interesting to kind of get into the Congress chambers and just hear the discussions. It would be awesome someday if they actually allow access to the Supreme Court. So it'd be fascinating to hear that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, they do have some cases that they allow listening, but it's very rare.
It's rare and it's really limited.
Yeah, no video.
I saw a video on the on social media. I don't know which one it was, but one of them about Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's time in the hearings, and based on that video, I think it would have been interesting to be able to hear his whole his whole amount of time, but made some very interesting correlations. So.
I mean, just another plug for C-SPAN. One of the cool things about it is you can usually find specific clips. They have a transcript, so you can see who's talking, and you can skip to that portion. So, I mean, it's not the most up to date video player out there, but it does a pretty good job. I mean, I think the biggest complaint I have is that if you're listening to it, it occasionally will die and you have to restart, and then, it takes a little while to sync back up. But I mean, it's a great service. I spend more time than I like to admit on it. Like you said, it's one of those things you learn so much about how the government works with, just the day-to-day stuff, just from watching that.
And
the initial reality TV.
It is truly reality TV, right?
Yeah, goes so far back. Yeah, I'm going to date myself a lot in this conversation. By the way, you guys, so I've already started that process.
I think Nick led off that way.
It's going to keep happening, so right. I'm fine with it.
But also, like the hearings that have been going on in the last few days, they're all recorded too, so you can go back. You don't have to be real time. You can go back and watch them or listen to them later.
Also joining us this week, as usual, is John Picozzi with Umfink. What's new with you this week?
So there was a lot of debate because in our show notes, I just put soap at this point of the show, and Stephen thought I was talking about coding. Or Nick thought I was talking about coding. Steve thought I was talking about soap operas. I'm in fact talking about showers. So
okay,
I know this is going to be a little bit awkward, but brace yourselves, listeners. I recently ran out of body wash in the shower.
Mr. Amazon ran out of something.
I did. It was vaguely intentional. So I over the last 6 months, I've been getting these ads on Facebook and various places for Dr. Squatch, which is their logo little guy there is like a Sasquatch. And I kind of went to their website a while back, and they have this whole quiz that they make you take, and when you after you're done with it, they offer you a bunch of products. And basically what it is it's all natural soap. And based on your preferences, after taking their quiz, they offer you the soaps they think you'll most enjoy. So I was like, all right, I'm almost out of my Old Spice body wash that, has probably a ton of chemicals in it. Once I'm done with that, let me order from these guys and see what it's all about. And I will tell you, I am using, I don't know, it's their coffee infused, soap of some sort. I don't know, but it is absolutely amazing. I'm also using their hair products. As you can tell, my hair is starting to look much better. But anyway, I just throwing it out there. I don't know.
I mean, I got to tell you, Dave wins the hair award today.
Well, that is true. I mean, Dave does have a great head of hair there, but yeah, I don't know. I just it was something different. It was something new, and the soap smells great, makes you feel great, and I thought the listeners might be interested in trying something new. Nick, what's going on with you?
I think there's no comments here about this.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, we need you to get on these sponsorships.
Even I knew what you were going to talk about. Amazing.
Amazon, Mac, Dr. Squatch, or whatever it is. I mean, John is the walking product placement for the resident product placement for.
Wait until I've tested out my grill brush a little bit more. That's going to be an interesting. Review. All right.
So for me, what's new? Last week I was finally able to find a RingFit. So anybody who has a Switch has probably heard of the RingFit game. It's an exercising game that you put one of the Joy-Cons around your thigh and another one into a ring that comes with the game. And let me tell you, it's a lot more fun and a lot harder than you would think. The game itself is kind of silly. You have to run somewhere and do certain exercises to, defeat the enemy, so to speak. And John and I have been playing it, a little bit each night, and it kind of sets a different difficulty depending on what your capabilities are. We've been having a lot of fun. It's a bit more. Maybe it's just because of the pandemic we haven't been getting out as much, but it feels like more exercise than you would expect.
Do you guys feel fitter?
I mean, it's only been less than a week, so it's hard. Maybe check back in a few weeks, but
Okay.
I mean, we're
I guess
certainly
anything that gets you to move.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a decent amount of jogging in place, and then with like little rest breaks, you can check your heart rate with it, because it's going to IR transmitter. So it seems like a pretty good product.
Does it automatically call 911?
I don't think so.
I feel like that'd be a good feature for me.
I've fallen down. I can't get up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you got a switch, get some space, then I'd certainly recommend it. It's been a lot of fun.
A lot cheaper than the Peloton that I recommended a couple of weeks ago.
Maybe we've been recommending a lot of products recently. We should reach out to the marketing teams. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, also joining us, also joining us this week for the first time is Dave Tarrant with Nubay. What's new with you this week?
It was suggested that I come up with a couple of things from my last week to talk about to kind of ease into this whole thing. And my first reaction was, I have a really boring life, so I'm not sure what the heck I'm going to talk about. But I gave it a little bit of thought. And one of the things that came up, which actually was pretty exciting for the moment, I'm a golfer and had a hole-in-one a little over a week ago. So I stretched it a little bit, but about 10 days ago. So if you're a golfer, that's a very exciting thing. It's a kind of instantaneous thing, and then it's over in terms of what's going on. But that was kind of exciting. The kind of ties a little bit into this podcast that I have such respect for Talking Drupal that I could have been out playing golf right now. And here I am talking to you guys. So you should take that as a big endorsement.
We appreciate it.
But, also related to it, as I thought about it, is that we had a little bit of a milestone. And I'll talk, a bunch about Nubay before we're done here. But we had a milestone, and I may dig into it a little bit later, but it was sort of something that we had been targeting for quite a while, aspirationally, in terms of what we could do. And it was really the first time that we did a complete upgrade, and I won't get into the weeds on what that meant, but it's a fairly large amount of stuff for all of our clients at the same time with basically a single command. And we've been kind of for years really pointing to being able to do that. And we actually did it this week. It kind of happened when we decided to just go ahead with an update of everything. And it was the first time we actually did all of them in sequence, parallel sequence in terms of that same time. So it's kind of been a good week in that regard. And it wasn't until I stopped and thought about it that I realized, hey, it was pretty good. So.
Well, that's great.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I've only been golfing a couple of times, but I mean, imagine a hole-in-one is one of those rare once-in-a-lifetime events. Maybe a couple of times if you're Tiger Woods, but
I play a lot of golf.
I was talking to somebody about golf, and they were like, "Oh, are you a golfer?" And I said, "Well, I mean, that depends. I'm a mini golfer." And they were like, oh, okay, I was just looking for a frame of reference, but okay. I'm like, I understand the game of golf. And it's interesting. The last time my son and I played mini golf, the hardest hole on the course, he hits a hole-in-one. I could not believe it. He couldn't believe it either. And now I understand the excitement. It's extremely exciting.
Dave, is it your first? Is it your first hole-in-one?
Actually, it's my third. So as I said, I play a lot of golf.
All right, there we go.
But the last, any time is great, and it may never happen again. And
True.
I know a lot of people I play with who have never had one, so they always say, "Geez, it takes
That's
a lot of luck."
impressive on a par 4. Good job.
Yeah, right. That's a good point. It was not a par 4.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for forgoing golf to join us. Can you give us kind of maybe a cloud level view or bird's eye view of what Nubay is all about?
That's a great lead in, the cloud's eye view. So Nubay is a nonprofit organization. We're a 501c3. So, in the U.S. tax parlance, that means that you're a charitable organization, providing social good, basically, is the test of that type of thing. And the service that we provide is aimed at other nonprofits. So we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations. Almost all of them are also 501c3, so that's meaningful in that sense. And what we do is we help them use technology more effectively. And this goes back a ways, but really it's born out of an observation of mine, 7-8 years ago now, when I was trying to figure out kind of what I should do with this stage of my career, or the last stage of my career, the most recent stage, hopefully not the last stage, if you will, was that a lot of where could we help, or where might I provide some skills to get more involved with nonprofit organizations. And the more I talked to nonprofit organizations, particularly the smaller ones, realized that they struggled a lot with using technology in terms of managing their organizations, whether it be donor management or client management or keeping track of things that they do in order to write grants or so on and so forth, maybe the events that they run and what have you. And across the board, as I talked to them and talked to a number of them, I found myself thinking, boy, you poor people. I mean, it was really sad because, having been involved in software in the software industry throughout my career, a pretty good idea of what you could do with today's technology, and it's a lot. And here were a lot of really, really good organizations doing really good things for the right reasons, and they were frankly as inefficient as you could possibly be in many, many ways. And a lot of it was around how they struggled with software. They couldn't afford to buy it or purchase it or license it. They couldn't afford the expertise to use it effectively or to even figure out what they should be doing and whatever. So I thought this is an area to add some value. And that was the launch of Nubay. We really worked our way into what our offering is through a set of stages, really. And that also goes back a little bit to happenstance, because when I started doing this in parallel, I had finished up with a commercial software organization I was involved in. And I was curious about Amazon's web services. This is 8 years ago, maybe now. Knew about it, knew that it was really coming on strong, and decided to just investigate to see what it was all about, see what opportunities might be there, whether they be commercial or otherwise, and signed up, got an account. And I'm not a technology guy. I've been involved in the technology industry forever, but the last coding I did was Fortran in college. So again, that's another dating myself kind of factor. So I kind of had the sense of, okay, what does it mean to code something? But really, I was always involved in other sides of it. So digging into Amazon was kind of interesting. And then as I got into that, and I was blown away, frankly, right off the bat, because the cloud service organizations or the cloud hosting we had done with applications, SaaS applications and what have you, always involved, a lot of hardware being bought, a lot of staging it, a lot of, upgrading and so on and so forth. And being able to just log in with my little credit card and, get an instance virtual server up and running without really having any technical expertise and just kind of Googling my way through stuff was kind of mind-blowing, frankly. And that is one of those rabbit holes, by the way, guys. That kind of led to what can I do on this stuff? And I started looking at open source software because, again, I came from a background which was commercial and proprietary. And I said, well, let me see if I can get something that's open source and free and see if I can get it to run. And, with a lot of pain and effort, got some stuff up and running, Linux configuration, Linux stack. And that led me to say, well, gee, this is great. It's cheap, hosting and management. There's software that doesn't require license fees for all the users and what have you. How could this be applied to the nonprofit needs? And that sort of led to, okay, there's good stuff out there, Drupal being among many things that are out there, but that nonprofits had zero chance of taking advantage of this stuff unless they were very large and could hire the staff to do that. So if you were the typical nonprofit that maybe had, 3 people to 30 people on staff, it really was not practical other than going out and paying a lot of consulting fees and whatever to utilize a lot of the software that otherwise is fantastic, but was outside the reach of what I would consider to be ordinary mortals. And so that's what we decided to fill that need and to do it and to build on top of open source applications, cloud hosted. Obviously, we use Amazon and really found that the tools that were available then and have continued to be available really met the needs that we were trying to address. And then we rolled into that. The last kind of piece of the equation, or another significant piece, was to say that there are a lot of people from the tech industry or that have tech aptitudes and whatever that would love to use their skills helping nonprofits. And kind of I used the example to say, I could go out and paint a house or pound nails for Habitat for Humanity, but that's not going to create a very good house. But effectively, if we can get technology people to say, hey, we'd like to help and leverage what the nonprofits do, then that can be a really productive force multiplier, if you will, in terms of what's going on. So we've always felt like volunteers should be part of the equation.
So, as everybody knows, right, Nubay is Latin for cloud. Where did you guys come up with that name? Like, how did you arrive at that?
Wait, you being sarcastic that everybody knows that, or is that true?
You guys didn't know that?
I saw it in the show notes, so I'm good with
Well,
that.
I mean, it's pretty close to the Spanish, and Spanish comes from Latin. So,
of course, there we go.
There we go. That's great. Yeah. See, I was going to date myself again. Is that I had Latin in high school way back, but I don't remember much of it. Anyway, yeah. So I will fill it in. So Nubay, what do you do when you're starting an organization, and particularly if you don't really know where it's going to head? Yes, I thought it would be a nonprofit, but I've also got the .com and the .org or whatever. But you're looking for a name that can kind of be flexible and go in different directions, and you want to find a domain that's available. 5 letters is nice, and Nubay, N-U-B-A-Y, is the Latin term is N-U-B-E, which is pronounced Nubay, and so it's the phonetic spelling of that word, which means cloud. So I thought, that's great. We can get the domain, we can make it mean whatever we want, and it's not hard to spell and use and whatever else. So kind of sits out there.
So as Nubay is a nonprofit, I mean, the term nonprofit kind of means a lot of things. Can you describe what it means specifically for you guys? You guys are nonprofit. What does it mean in terms of maybe money coming in? Where does it go?
Sure.
Are your employees paid? Like, what is your structure of your organization, and
Sure.
Where does the money go?
Yeah. So the answer is there's not a lot of money. Part of what we've tried to do for a variety of reasons is to not have an overhead that requires us to either constantly be raising money, although we do some of that, or charge any more than we have to the nonprofits that we serve and we provide our services to. So the goal is to have them spend their precious funds that they have and are able to raise for the mission they have, whether it be feeding the hungry or housing or you name it in terms of what's going on, to do that. So help them, but don't charge them a lot. Now, we do, have fees that we put into it. Part of it is simply that if you don't charge anything for what you do, sometimes people sort of abuse the privilege in terms of what's going on. But our goal is to minimize that, and part of that is to have low overhead. And the way that we're able to do that, there's a couple. One is, having volunteers. Okay, if you don't have to make a payroll and you have volunteers, I'm a pro bono volunteer. My chief technical officer is a pro bono volunteer. We have other volunteers that contribute portions of their time, and others give us really, really low rates relative to what they might charge a large commercial organization in terms of that. So we're trying to bring those cost efficiencies to the nonprofits themselves, so indirectly they benefit from that. We also have a small number of corporations who believe that our mission is a good one and it makes sense, particularly those that are technology companies. And we're applying for some grants now from organizations that would not be surprising. I won't name them because we're in the process of working with them. So we believe that if we can get the technology industry to put modest, in fact, from their perspective, very small amounts of money by this, we can do some really amazing things by, again, leveraging open source applications, inexpensive cloud servers, volunteers, and what have you. And so we are a nonprofit. We make a big deal. I try to point out that one of the issues and challenges for nonprofits, given that the challenge they have of having technology resources on staff that they can use to evaluate software and what have you, is that they have a hard time, many of them have a hard time sorting out all the sales pitches they get from all the software vendors that are for-profit vendors, and there's nothing wrong with that per se. But it doesn't necessarily put them in a position to say, look, we're going to give you advice, and it's going to be advice for your purposes and to benefit you, not so that we can just add another client or customer or what have you. So we really try to stay away from selling to the nonprofits and emphasize our goal is to help them. One of our taglines is we're on your side, that we're not trying to sell to you. We're trying to help you in whatever way that we can. We know technology, and there's some really interesting things that we've put together for you.
So do you reference these people as customers or partners or
clients? Typically clients.
Okay.
So we think that's probably the best word to come up with, but yeah, clients.
So as you were mentioning earlier, that is your hosting done on Amazon Cloud?
It is.
Sites? It is. Okay.
It is. And what we do, to get into the weeds just a little bit, and this kind of is interesting, I think, from the viewpoint of looking at a lot of open source applications, and this might segue us into Drupal a bit, is that there's a lot of open source applications that are, and this is the right jargon, even they call them single tenant, because when you're building SaaS applications, certainly in the commercial world, it's usually a multi-tenant application whereby there's a body of code that assumes that there's multiple organizations that use it, and the databases and other things kind of segregate them in managing it or what have you. But an awful lot of open source applications really looks like it's designed and architected in order to be sort of one body of code or thereabouts, okay, depending on how you play it out, for each organization. Some of it because of a history of on-premise hosting and things like that, or management. What we found with Amazon, it gave us the ability to chain these instances, virtual servers, and then use the tools to, whether it be launch a new set of code, to manage the code, to upgrade it all with commands and logic and things like that we've built out. In Amazon's parlance, it's the cloud formation functionality or the run commands or other functionality that we can use to basically say, and that's what I referenced a little bit earlier, which says, okay, we've got N number of clients and N number of instances all sized appropriately for what their volume needs are, size needs are, or whatever. But to them, and to some extent to us, it looks like a productization of things that otherwise could be customized from now till forever. And so much of what we've done is to figure out how to productize in a standardized way, tying back to the cost issue, so that we could support a large number of nonprofits without getting into a large number of costs. That if everybody's configuration is different and what have you, so much of the support cost gets into sorting out the differences. Why is this working here, not working there? Oh, you don't have this feature or module or whatever else. So we've done a lot of work. It's taken a long time to get to this point, but where we can sort of manage this stuff with a modest amount of technical resources.
Dave, one of the things I think we've failed to mention here so far, and I think it's because all of us on the call know what it is, but I don't think we've described what functionality you're providing to nonprofits.
Great point. I should bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
On our website, and I'll come back to this a few different times, nubay.org and nubay.org, we have our FAQs and whatever, and one of the questions that we get frequently is, do you do financial software as an example of an application category? And the answer to that is actually no. In fact, we like that question because it's easier to explain what we don't do than to explain what we do. We do a lot. We happen to not do financial software because we've chosen not to get into it, and we've not found any good, solid open source applications for that. But we do an amazing range of things otherwise. So I started mentioning earlier, donor management, event management, membership management, client management, and that's all those things tend to fall out of database applications, website functionality, obviously managing a website, email functionality, and a whole host of things that all are pieced together, and I'll get into some of the what we call our anchor tenants for our suite of software running on this platform, and it's Drupal and Civi CRM. So the CRM database application is Civi CRM, and the name and it implies that it's done for civic reasons. It's a CRM that has been designed and built for over 15 years with nonprofits in mind. So unlike or differentiating it from a Salesforce, which is a common go-to for nonprofits that want to get a database to keep track of their donors or all the things that they do, Salesforce is the behemoth, the big elephant in the room, and the one that they frequently go to. But that's certainly a CRM, but it's a CRM that was designed and continues to be oriented around the needs of large commercial organizations. Civi CRM is different, and it focuses on the kinds of things that you would want to have in a nonprofit CRM. My becoming a Drupal fan, frankly, worked its way from Civi. We call it Civi. It's commonly referenced as Civi in the short. Was designed and continues to be designed to be integrated with a CMS. Joomla, WordPress, and Drupal. And of the three, Civi's integration with Drupal is far and away the best. Okay, while it is integrated with WordPress, which is clearly the high volume CMS in the nonprofit world and elsewhere, the integration and the levels and depth of integration with Drupal are spectacular. And when I actually got started, I was using WordPress. When I then learned more about how using WordPress with Civi, because I needed something, when I learned about the integration with Drupal, I switched. I said, let me see how Drupal fits into this. Side note, I went from, kind of understanding WordPress. I didn't spend a lot of time with it, but figured out, okay, here's how this works. And while I wouldn't say it was drop dead simple, it was kind of reasonably straightforward. I started using Drupal and I was like, what? It was like totally hit my head against the wall. It's like, I'm not getting it. And then a switch turned in my head. I was like, oh, I see. And, so this is another warning on the dating myself thing, not dating in a dating app thing. It reminded me of the way, way, way back. Maybe you guys touched it somewhere along the way. I've read about it in school or something, but with the Texas Instruments versus Hewlett-Packard calculators. And the Hewlett-Packard scientific calculator was a, noun verb, and Texas Instruments was verb noun. It's like, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you got? It's the what and then, how or what, what and how kind of a thing. And I thought a bit, I said, whoa, wait a second. It's kind of, I got to flip that switch that says with Drupal, you think about what and then where. With WordPress, you think about where and then what. And until that switch flipped, I was really struggling with Drupal. Once it flipped, it was like, oh, I love this. This is much better. And then kind of got deeper and deeper into the Civi part of it. So that's my blowing.
So did you choose Civi before you chose Drupal?
Yes.
Is what I'm hearing. Okay, so
yes.
You learned about Civi.
Yes.
You love the functionality of Civi, and then by learning that product, you said, hey, this thing is built in Drupal. What is Drupal all about?
Right. So I learned of the web form integration.
Yeah.
Drupal web form integrated with the Civi database. So the database on the back end being the true CRM.
Yeah.
And then the functionality of a public facing web form and other functionality, ultimately views and things like that. And I have to say that I am continually amazed when I say we can do so many different things, meaning Nubay's platform and functionality and whatever, is when you take a CMS and really tightly integrate it with a CRM solution, all sorts of applications become possible. And given that both Civi and Drupal are incredibly flexible, you can find stuff to do pretty much anything you want. When you put the two things together, it supercharges both of them in a way that, I tell you the number of different ways in which clients use it, or they ask us, oh, here's how we run our organization. Can we track this or do that or whatever else? And the answer is not only almost always yes, maybe it's okay here, we got to figure out how to do it. But it's yes enhanced by okay, here's how you automate the email updates that link to a web form that when they click on the web form, it's pre-filled out with their numbers and information in the database. And then all that maybe triggers a reminder to go to an event and registers them for the event and takes their money. I mean, all this stuff kind of becomes a seamless process that makes these nonprofits, allows them to become much more efficient.
So Civi CRM is a Drupal distribution, open source Drupal distribution, right?
Is it an open source Drupal distribution? Now you get into my semantic issue. It is on its, so there is a Civi CRM module, but it's slightly different in terms of how it's integrated and whatever. But there is a Civi CRM module, but it really is kind of I wouldn't say it's co-equal. It lives inside of Drupal more or less, and it certainly adopts and uses the Drupal user-facing UI for its own. And so where Drupal does something well in the UI, Civi doesn't bother doing it.
Okay, so you guys at Nubay are taking Civi CRM and you're customizing it for your clients?
So what we've done is take Drupal, take Civi, configure both of them with extensions in Civi, with modules in Drupal that we believe are useful, very useful for 80, 90, 95%, maybe 100% of nonprofit organizations. Because at the technology level, oftentimes nonprofits kind of have the same needs. So what we do is we package up the full set of capabilities that are needed, both on the Civi side, the Drupal side, and where integrations via modules that do the integration, as well as Civi functionality. We've gotten involved with some development, sponsoring some development in terms of both modules and Civi extensions that sort of fill in some gaps that we thought needed to be addressed. We bring together all the dependencies, so the whole LAMP stack and related dependencies, which is a constantly growing thing, all the stuff that makes it, pain in the ass, frankly, to keep all the stuff together and updated and whatever, and not breaking every time there's a new release and so on and so forth. We've really done a lot to productize them, and yet at the same time, we have a functional approach to the whole thing whereby if an organization, a client needs a fairly exotic, let's say, Drupal module or a non-standard Civi extension, they can have that, but without breaking the sort of, it's 95% the same for everybody, and we can sort of rely upon it when we dig in with a client. They say, something isn't doing what we wanted, we'd like to do something. So that's just a question of a configuration option or whatever makes sense. So
you're kind of taking these open source things that are available, gluing them together, and making them work for your clients.
Make them work, yeah. I mean, again, when I was doing this as a non-technical sort of wannabe technical guy, I was constantly kind of amazed that I cannot believe you make people go through this to make this stuff work. And then I'd interact at Drupal groups or Civi groups or whatever, and my head would be spinning with, how much of the language was just flying right by me. But gradually I've gotten deeper into it and found people that, know what I don't know, and they volunteered and helped, and we put stuff together.
So I'm curious, can you describe for us who your ideal organization or client is? I mean, is it like a 2-person nonprofit, a 50-person nonprofit? Is there a particular space of nonprofits that you can help out?
So, you've actually hit about what the range is. We have nonprofits that are as small as a couple of people on staff. We rule out, nonprofits that are really small, and there are a lot of those whereby they're all volunteers, they have no staff, and they raise money, they do this, they do that, which is all well and good. We focus on nonprofits that have some complexity of their operations. Typically, that means they're providing services as well as raising money. So they raise money, but the heart of what their organizational activity is providing services to the needy. Okay, so Mass Affordable Housing Association helps first-time urban home buyers to work through the process, find the money, get assistance in whatever. First Literacy helps immigrants learn a second language, and actually they teach the teachers, so they teach English as a second language. I Foster out in California, they help foster kids move on from the foster care system into the job world with training and so on and so forth. So almost all of them, or virtually all of them, have a social services activity, and what we can help them a lot with is those are oftentimes complex things that they have to keep track of. And oftentimes when we interact with them, they have a spreadsheet mess. Frankly, they use spreadsheets for everything or a lot of stuff, and maybe they have a donor management on the side, or they have their website that somebody's cousin built 5 years ago for them and whatever else. So we help them, pull things together coherently, use a CRM database to structure the data, to put it on an ongoing basis so that they can keep track of what they do and demonstrate it to funders and things like that. So, but actually that 2 to 50 or whatever is not a bad metric. Civi CRM has some very, very large organizations. The Wikimedia Foundation, for example, uses Civi CRM, and they have millions and millions of, donors and clients and activities and things like that. So that's, at one extreme. So the software is very, very powerful and can be used by very large organizations. But oftentimes those larger organizations, they don't need us as much. They have a lot of money, perhaps. They can raise a lot of money. They can hire a staff. The software, certainly Drupal, is powerful enough for them to use, and many of them would do, might do that independent of us in whatever. But we try to zero in on those that we can help the most, and they tend to be the smaller ones that, don't have the funding to, go after the full-fledged applications and whatever. Side note, I have to say, in this, when we talk about it, and I think one of the best ways to recognize an organization that could be referenced to us, and that's our ask of anybody who hears this, if you know a nonprofit that, is either struggling with, what they're trying to do with a database or CRM or their spreadsheets or whatever, and oftentimes those are the same nonprofits that are trying to use Salesforce. Salesforce is a fantastically complex, successful product and what have you, but it is, I would go out on a limb, no, I'm not on a limb, I'm going to say this, it is dead wrong for the smaller and even mid-sized nonprofits because it's way too complex. It is not built for them. It can be made to do anything, but at $150 to $200 an hour for consultants, that adds up fast when these nonprofits got some free Salesforce software, but every time they try to do something, it's another 2,000 here, 1,000, 10,000 there. And so they struggle with it mightily, and we've helped a number of nonprofits move on from their failed effects with Salesforce, and we like to, when they're getting to the point where they're thinking about a better organizational structure, or they're learning what a CRM is or a database is, that's a good time for them to sort of say, well, here's an option that once you see it, you might find it's just right for you.
So is it fair to say, if you, if an organization comes to you and they have Salesforce or another CRM, your advice may be for them to move from that solution to Civi, or are you guys willing to work with other CRMs if they
no. So we've made the decision that for us to do what we do most effectively, we really have to, I'm going to say we own the platform, but we have control over what it is, because again, there's a slippery slope to, you're consulting to someone, but then everybody's different, and there's, that's what consultants do well, and they should do that. The Salesforce, when an organization has Salesforce, the only time I would say to them that we would be happy to talk to you, and if we can help you, we'll help you, it's that they're struggling and they're considering what to do. They realize that maybe this was a mistake, and hopefully they haven't spent too much money in that process, or they're looking at what it's going to, they're about ready to make a decision, or they're in the process or whatever. But if they're CRM aware, sometimes we like to get them before they make the Salesforce mistake. And again, I use Salesforce in the commercial world, with other organizations, and have all the respect in the world for them, but it's right where it's right, and where it's wrong, it's painful and expensive.
So, that leads to another question. Is it possible that, some nonprofits are not ready for Civi CRM? And if so,
sure,
how would you guys help them?
Probably we'd help them. Well, if they have a need and a problem, we might give them advice and say, here's what you might want to do. Okay. An example would be an organization that almost exclusively raises money to give to, let's say, medical research, cancer research, take your pick. That's a relatively straightforward organizational charter. They raise money, they package it up, and they write checks to the research organizations. There's lots of options for them to do donor management, and could point them in that direction or whatever. Or they could even use Salesforce that. So we're more than happy to point them in the right direction if they don't have needs that would be met well and much better than other alternatives with what we have. But in terms of saying, will take you on as a client and help you do something else. Now we have a solution, and we spent a lot of time and energy getting it right. And so then it's a question, is there a good fit between what their needs are and what we can give them for a very, very low cost ultimately?
So do you stick to just the technology side, or do you also kind of give people advice on fundraising and how to manage their CRM? Not just like entering the data, but what kind of data to collect and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we do a lot of the latter, nothing of the former. So fundraising, there's lots of ways in which they get advice on fundraising and whatever, but there is an awful lot of data management expertise that folks that are coming from the spreadsheet world actually learn a lot about how to structure their data so that as they go forward in time, they're not just creating lots and lots of new spreadsheets. So we do a lot of hand-holding. It is hand-holding as they work their way into a more coherent way to manage their data. Usually we're at the point where they know they've got a mess and they're just frustrated as hell because it seems redundant and it's repeating things over and over and over again. So we do a lot of hand-holding, a lot of onboarding of the data that they have, whether it be in a Salesforce or another application, donor management or otherwise, and getting it into the right form so that they can, take their email list from Constant Contact. They can take their donors from their spreadsheet. They can take other stuff that they do and get it into a CRM and with Drupal web forms that allow them to fill out the data as they receive it or push things out to the field. Oftentimes what will happen is that the distribution of the work to the point of data entry via Drupal web forms is one of the most valuable things we can do, because otherwise they got paper coming into data entry people or the poor staff that they have that are just trying to keep up with paper flow rather than figure out how to say, here's a way to use Drupal with permissions and what have you to have people enter their own data when they register for an event or so on and so forth. So lots of things like that. So lots of data help because we know that, and it ties well into what the tools enable and makes them better users of it all.
So if somebody's listening right now and they're like really gravitating towards what you're talking about, and they want to get involved, how do you guys produce for your clients? Is it all volunteer based? Do you have some developers on staff? And how would somebody go about getting involved?
Getting involved in terms of helping us versus a client?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So we do have at the website, a volunteer sign-up form. We have hundreds of people that have volunteered. We have a variety of needs. I'd say that the best fit thus far is when someone who learns about what we're doing, has a skill set that makes them well suited to helping, whether it be with Drupal website functionality perhaps, or data management, or understands how web forms work and so on and so forth, sort of how do these pieces work together, and is aware of and might already be working with a nonprofit that they know has this need, because sometimes people get involved with nonprofits and they say, oh my God, that's exactly what's going on at XYZ organization. That's the one to reach out to us. We've got a web form to sign up to be a volunteer, tell us a little bit about what the skill set is interested. And oftentimes the volunteer is really showing up with it, and I'm trying to help a nonprofit, and you've got what we need, and rather than try to get a little here, a little there, and something else, having a more comprehensive platform is a good idea. So there are other examples where we have volunteers, and we haven't gotten heavily into it yet, but one of the tasks that we're looking forward to getting into is building out more standard content types in Drupal and CSS functionality. We have a saying that says we would like to turn for these nonprofits to have Squarespace simplicity, but using Drupal as the sort of delivery vehicle, okay, and kind of standardizing on themes with content types that are already created that have capabilities in terms of the theme that already support the fact that content type, because a lot of it's the same when you get into it. It's the functionality that they're looking to put on the websites looks very much the same, but when it's always you can have a theme for that or do this or that, then it becomes expensive in coding and whatever. So that's one of the things that I envision at some point saying, would be great to have a bunch of people say, okay, here's a whole bunch of, menu option that choices of how your menu could look. And we'd like to implement those in a way that's consistent with our model so they could be plug and play, check the box. And I like that. I like that functionality for my menuing, and here's our color scheme for our organization, and so on and so forth. And then people could, with a UI, be doing Squarespace-like stuff, but behind the scenes, it's really Drupal integrated with Civi. It's aspirational.
So hey, any listeners, if you have questions or feedback, you can reach out to us. Us being the Talking Drupal folks here on Twitter at Talking Drupal. You can also hit us up on the Talking Drupal channel on Drupal Slack. There's been some activity there, and you can always send us an email at show@talkingdrupal.com. We do send out updates very infrequently on our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter. You can sign up for that.
And we'd like to say a big thank you to our patrons for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing that big button in the sidebar that says Become a Patron.
And for our listeners, if you go to nubay.org, nubay.org, there's a demo video that shows you what they can do with Drupal and Civi CRM. But before we move on, David, is there anything that we missed talking about that you'd like to let our listeners know?
Tons and tons of things, but that would take another 2-3 hours. So no, we're good. That was fun. This has been fun.
Sounds good. And Stephen, if our listeners want to reach out to you, how could they get in touch with you?
You can reach me at Stephen Cross on Twitter with a PH.
And John, how can our listeners reach out to you?
It sounded like Stephen forgot how people could reach him for a second there. You could reach me on all the major social networks at John Picozzi, as well as on Drupal.org. And you can find out about Oomph at oomphinc.com.
And Dave, for our listeners had some questions for you, where could they reach out to you?
Again, I would push them to the website just because we have a form there for asking questions or reaching out, and we try to follow up pretty quickly, whether it be with a one-on-one conversation or other kinds of mechanisms. So kind of route it all that way, and it will get to me as well.
How about your home phone number as well?
Yeah.
What is that?
I have a home phone number, but I never answered. It's
Okay.
The mobile number, no.
The home phone number is dedicated to spam callers.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can reach me at Nixvan, NICXVAN, pretty much everywhere. And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. See you guys next week.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Thanks all.